All right, folks, hello. Is this how we welcome people in Portugal? Is this how it's done? I said hello. That's better. Nicely done, nicely done. Okay, roll intro. So this is a talk which is unlikely to make any of your lives better or teach you to do anything useful whatsoever, but I'm hoping at the very least that you will walk out here slightly happier than you did before. I think that's going to, is that going to do a thing? Here we go. I'm going to talk about two of my favorite subjects all at the same time. On one hand, I really love computers. On the other hand, I really love films, or movies if you prefer. And this is a talk about those Hollywood films over the last 100 years that have attempted to tell the world what computers are actually like, and how accurate or not they often are. But what is a computer? I have to define terms first because from a certain point of view, this is a computer. And so's this, and so's she. So what's a computer? For the purposes of this talk, this is the definition that I am going to use. A computer is an autonomous or semi-autonomous machine which can receive instructions and then act autonomously thereupon. Are we all clear on the definition? Therefore, Stonehenge is excluded. It's just sort of a calendary thing. It's basically a sort of ancient version of a blueberry. Or, it's whatever. Right. How does films get into cinema? Well, the route they take is unusual, and this will all become relevant later. Because in many ways, the touchstones in terms of the storylines are mythological. So these are various mythological creatures. That's Talos, the giant bronze man, which was depicted in Jason and the Argonauts. Yes, I know that's not what he is in mythology. I know all of this, but yes, that sort of thing. That's Galatea, a statue that was brought to life by the gods after being created by the sculptor Pygmalion. And then the golem from Jewish mythology, where I think a rabbi puts something in his mouth and it is brought to life. The point is, these are inanimate objects made animate by the will of the gods or God or whatever. But then as time goes on, this idea is revised somewhat to the vague sense that there is some sort of technology or science or something at work which is animating the inanimate. That's a mechanical doll brought to life, Coppelia, and TikTok from The Wizard of Oz, and also an absolutely pant-wettingly terrifying film from the 1980s. And you might know him. He doesn't actually have a name, but people tend to call him Frankenstein's monster. You get the idea. There's a vague sort of a science. Yeah, the science is basically wave my hand and it's basically magic, but it's still science. And there's also, does anyone know the Mechanical Turk? Because it's just a fun little sideline that I could not miss off. Allegedly a mechanical man who would play chess, and actually there was a guy hidden inside the chest underneath. It's awesome. There's a book on it. You should read it. Right. Come on. Then we enter the film age. Where exactly this begun is a matter of some debate, sometime between the late 1800s and the 1920s. Films as we know them developed somewhere in 1920s to 1930s, bit by bit and on and going. So where did computers enter cinema? There are three contenders which tend to appear in articles online as the first computer in cinema. I'm going to take them one at a time and then give you my opinion on which it is. First is The Master Mystery, starring none other than Harry Houdini. So this guy is often said to be the first one. He's certainly the earliest of our three contenders. Problem is, in the story, he is a man who had his brain removed and put into a robot body. He is RoboCop, not a computer. How about this guy from L'Uomo Macchina, the machine man from Italy in the 1920s? There we are, an Italian robot. Problem here is L'Uomo Macchina there is remote controlled. It's just a man somewhere with a remote control telling him what to do, not a computer, no autonomy. So this leaves only one candidate, 1924's Metropolis from Germany. And the first computer depicted on screen, at least according to my definition, never actually named on screen, often called Falsche Maria, or probably more accurately, Maschinenmensch, the machine person. Here we go, played by the absolutely incredible Brigitte Helm. It's a stunning performance, and yes, this is where C-3PO comes from. It's kind of from this thing. And there we go. This is implied almost, despite looking like science, it's often implied in the film to be some sort of black magic or invocation to something evil, resulting in this creation, kind of like Galatea or something of that sort, brought to life by the will of this sort of evil magician slash scientist, Roodvank, who then sends it out to do his evil bidding. And for the rest of the next few decades, this is basically what computers tend to be. These sort of robot people. They're sort of basic minions who stomp around and threaten the goodie at periods in the film. It's probably not so much due to any sort of artistic ideals, and very likely because it's simply cheaper than putting makeup on extras. You just sort of stick a pin on their head and now they're a robot. That's about as much thought as I suspect went into it. But there we are, aren't they charming? This, incidentally, another little sidestep, this is the first time the word robot was used in this is actually from a lost 1930s film of RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots. But these are not robots in the sense that we say. They are robots, this is what the creator named them, but the word robot comes from a Czech word, which I am probably about to mispronounce, roboter. Anyone from Czechia here? Oh, well. But it means slave. These guys are basically replicants from Blade Runner. They're artificial people created in a laboratory to go out and do menial work. Interesting, but not computers, nor actually robots, despite having the name. The big moment when this all kind of changes is 1950s Destination Moon. Destination Moon is a very early example of what we might now call hard science fiction or hard sci-fi. That is science fiction which is attempting to stick closely to the real rules of or laws of physics, to real science, as close as we are able to do it, with maybe one or two concessions. And in 1950, it was attempting, as accurate as you could in 1950, to depict a journey to the moon. There are some rather charming mistakes. For one, the ship is aerodynamic, and you don't actually need to do that in space. The other is that the rocket flies to the moon and then spins around and lands, which, as we know, they did not do when Apollo 11 finally reached the moon. But still, for 1950, almost a decade before really doing it, not bad. It does get most things right. Also, the science of it all is explained by none other than Woody Woodpecker. That is actually true. And, watch carefully, the first real computer ever to be seen on screen. There it is, in this very brief clip from Destination Moon, the first time a real computer shown on a film. And this is, not only that, actually doing the job it was designed for, which is surprisingly rare in the 1950s. It's a computer which is used for calculating trajectories of missiles, here to calculate the trajectory of the rocket. So this continued on in other films of the era, like When Worlds Collide, the epic, where we have another appearance by the same sort of computer, and here it is. And now, hang on a minute. Either that guy with the cool shirt up there is working several jobs, or someone got lazy and used the same bit of stock footage twice. But it can't possibly be that now, can it? Fine. This is another film from that period which shows another use the 50s had for the computer, and that is to legitimize the set. This is Angry Red Planet from, I think, 1959, and this is the spaceship set. So to make our spaceship look legitimate, we've got a real computer at the background being used as a prop to show, like, it's a real spaceship and stuff. It does things and stuff and flies places. And look at our operators. They often wear lab coats and do science. The computer is an extension of their scientific endeavors. Notice also we've got a mixed-sex team. This is a trend I shall watch, but will not be continuing in a way that is entirely pleasant. What about the first developer to ever be depicted on screen? Can anybody take a guess at who might have played the first software scientist or computer scientist ever to appear on screen? Anybody got a guess? 3, 2, 1. Okay, well, sorry? Mark Zuckerberg. He is not that old, to my knowledge. Although nothing would surprise me. I'm not convinced he's not an android who's been living secretly among us for all these years, only to spring up and start his... That wouldn't surprise me. No, the answer is, in fact, Spencer Tracy. The first computer scientist ever depicted on screen was played by Spencer Tracy in a romantic comedy starring himself and Katharine Hepburn. this is actually true. I have watched it. You are welcome. You no longer need to. I mean, do if you like. It's not a bad film. So here he is, ain't he cute? Now, in this film, Spencer Tracy is the guy who's been brought into a giant company that makes something. And the lady who runs the research department, played by Katharine Hepburn, has been told he's going to come and install a new computer in the research department. And she is shocked by this because she thinks it's going to end all of their jobs. And over the course of the film, there are many romantic misunderstandings. And spoiler alert, it turns out at the end the computer is not there to replace her, but rather to make her job easier, which is basically right. That's fine. And if anyone's curious to see what the actual computer looks like, here is our first instance of a computer being used as a major plot device in a film, other than just, basic stock footage in the background or something like that. There it is, in Iraq. I do not know where they got this name from. And it's a prop. It's a giant prop. That's not a real computer. Everything on this was actually programmable. You could put whatever design you wanted into the grid of lights there, because they had this idea that this would be used in the background of an awful lot of other films and TV series for many years to come, which it was, up to and including one of my favorites, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, where it's used I think it's used in a nuclear submarine or something to be the computer in the background. So this computer prop did a lot of work. And notice again, the operators are women. That's how it was. The entire team working the computer are women in this film. There's only one bloke that works on it, and it's Spencer Tracy. Everyone else is a woman. And it's not seen as unusual or odd. It's fine. They belong there. There's no comment further made, and that's interesting. So in 1957, they basically got things about right. What went wrong? Interesting. Oh, I think we've already seen these guys. Go away. So things take a turn for the interesting in 1960. This is probably the oddest entry on this particular film odyssey. This is a TV series from the BBC made in 1960 called A for Andromeda. So the plot of A for Andromeda is that scientists on Earth, somewhere near the BBC headquarters, funnily enough, pick up a transmission from outer space. They think at first it's a code or something. They try and decode it and then realize it's binary. It's binary. And the binary is actually instructions on how to build a computer, the software that you need to load into it, and the instructions on how to use it. So they think, what could possibly go wrong? And they plug it all together, and thus we have a 6-part BBC miniseries. And what the computer does is it creates a woman. It creates a woman called Andromeda, named after the mythological Andromeda, because once again, the mythological component is going to continue for some time. And Andromeda is basically like a Bluetooth dongle for the computer, because the computer is a huge, hulking great thing with no voice, and Andromeda relays its commands. And as a person, the properties of Andromeda, she is cold and emotionless, a little ruthless. And Julie Christie, who plays her here, has kind of dropped her voice, like half a semitone or so, in order to appear less feminine, potentially more masculine. Because what is happening over the 60s is that we still have the sense that women work on computers, but now there's an authorial eye which is cast over this idea, which is starting to suggest that there's something wrong with this. These are not my opinions, by the way. You may hear many such relayed through old film. These are not my opinions. But this and the computer now, because previously computers were generally he, she, it interchangeably and none of it mattered, but now the computer is most definitely male. It is a he, and as a person, as a being, it is depicted as ruthless and vindictive. When Andromeda betrays it at one point, it reacts by punishing her physically with burns on her hands. And to further the mythological connection, this is the way that she interfaces with the computer, with these handles. Now, the mythological Andromeda was a princess chained to a rock like this, while a monster came to try and eat her or whatever. And so symbolically here, she is the Andromeda chained to the rock of the computer, which is also the monster. And these are trends that continue through the 60s, this idea of women who work in computers who are losing something of themselves by being so closely bound to the computer. Somehow, according to the films of the 60s, they are becoming less human. These are 3 different ladies from Doctor Who in the 1960s, and in each case, they are women who work with the computer and thus become less feminine, less human, more inhuman, and also more fallible because their logic stops them from having these weird intuitive leaps that a human being can make. Once again, I must stress these are not my views. Oh, and also in 1960s Doctor Who, there is an episode called The War Machines, where all computers in the entire world are linked together in a sort of inter-network of computers. They never quite use the word internet, but that is basically what it is. And the 60s being the 60s, and they having the views of computers that they do, of course it comes to life and starts trying to kill us all. Because what else would it do? This is an episode of The Prisoner from the 1960s, and in this one, a computer is used for educational purposes, but our hero is shocked to find that the concept of education for the computer is rote memorization, removing the humanity and the individuality from those that learn from it. Again, somehow draining the humanity away from those associated with the terrible, inhuman, logical computer. An interesting note at this point that this is when Dune came out. There has been a recent pair of films of Dune. They are excellent. They are also not computer films for a very good reason of Dune hates computers. In the world of Dune, it's kind of not really mentioned in the film, but in the deep background, the idea is that computers, thinking machines, are forbidden. No one may have a machine that thinks. And this ties in perfectly to the sort of the feel for these things in the 60s. So when you're watching Dune, although it is an excellent film, you are seeing something that is incredibly 60s in its outlook. So, moving on to 2001, A Space Odyssey. Has anybody seen 2001, A Space Odyssey? Hands up, please. Very good. Now, keep hands up if you think you understood it. We got a couple of vague hands. Well, let me demystify it for you and put it into the context of the 1960s with all of the other things that we've examined, and I think you'll find it's not that hard to understand. So, 2001, A Space Odyssey. First off, mythological connection. Odyssey. This is a space odyssey. Actually, interestingly, not a journey of discovery, as most people think the word odyssey means. It's not. It's actually a story about a soldier trying desperately to return home, even though fate won't allow him. But that aside, it's an odyssey. So, what happens in this? First off, we start in the Dawn of Man sequence, where these primitive pre-humans first discover the use of tools. And that's one of the most important scenes in the entire film. This film is about mankind's relationship with tools. The bone here is a tool, the first tool, an animal bone used as a club to kill. And then in one of the most incredible bits of cinematography, possibly in the history of cinema, I say this with no irony, in victory, the primitive man throws the bone in the air, and then there is one of the most incredible cuts ever. It becomes a spaceship. And that is amazing. What the film is saying to you is that the spaceship and the bone are the same thing. They are tools that we have created to do our work for us. Now, the astronauts that you see in 2001: A Space Odyssey are very inhuman. You never see them emote. They have blank, unreadable expressions on their faces through much of the film. There's a scene where Frank Poole, one of the astronauts, sees a happy birthday message from home, and he simply looks at it impassively and then turns over in his bed and loses interest. These are people who have lost their humanity by their reliance on tools, on the computers. And that's what the film is trying to get at. HAL 9000, the computer, is the film's equivalent of the Cyclops, Polyphemus, with his single eye. And the spaceship is kind of like Polyphemus's cave into which our hero has been trapped. And Dave Bowman, like Odysseus before him, kills the Cyclops, and he turns off HAL. And in doing so, he reasserts his humanity against the inhumanity of the tool, of the machine, and then ascends to the next level of evolution via a series of very confusing scenes. But nevertheless, there's also some really good classical music, and I like classical music. So that's basically what that film is about. And it is a perfect encapsulation of the entire 1960s view of what the computer is and what it means to us. So let's move into the 70s. Things have moved on a little bit since the 60s, but only subtly. This is one of my favorites, actually. Colossus the Forbin Project. Has anyone seen it? Hey, there's one over there. How about that? Hardly anyone's even heard of it. I really like this film. Okay. We've still got a lot of these negative attitudes towards computers. The computer's the baddie in this one. But there is a subtle distinction. The previous computers wanted to come in and rule us because they were evil. This is different. Colossus is not the same. So this is Colossus. It's a giant computer made in a hollowed-out mountain. And the idea is that what they do is they give it complete control of all of the US nuclear codes. Because what can possibly go wrong? And now, apparently, this thing does not need any maintenance. No one ever needs to come in and dust it off a bit, or no one ever needs to, provide a patch for the software because the software is perfect. And that's real. That's a thing, isn't it? Software with no bugs, and especially software that runs the nuclear codes. So fine, okay, they plug this thing in and switch it on, and they seal off the mountain so that no one can ever go in there ever again, because that would be wrong. And this is our team. International and multiracial. This is all pretty good still so far. So when they switch the computer on, it leaves a message, warning, there is another system. Well, what does that mean? Turns out the Russians have done it too. And theirs is called Guardian. And Colossus goes into a massive strop and refuses to work until it's allowed to network with Guardian, which it does. Initially, the two computers talk to each other in just symbolic mathematical code, and eventually come up with their own language, which is entirely based in binary. Now, this is actually a thing. This is an actual thing. In some machine learning and AI systems, the computer can effectively conjure up its own language that makes sense to it, but not to us. And this is actually a really big deal if, for example, your computer program is deciding whether or not someone should be allowed alone. Because all you can say is computer says no. And we can't say why, because no one can understand the computer anymore. So, having merged fully, which is what happens, the new merged Colossus and Guardian, now known simply as Colossus, decides to take over the world. But there is a difference. Colossus wants to rule us, not because it hates us, but because it wants to make sure that we are safe from everything, including ourselves, like through the dangers of self-rule. Actually, these days, I'm not sure if Colossus ain't got a point. But, so it puts cameras everywhere, and it insists that it has to watch our hero, Dr. Forbin, 24 hours a day, even to the extent that when he pours too much vermouth in his martini, it is critical of him. I know guys like that. So they come up with a plan to try and conspire in secret, and so he fakes that one of his research assistants is in fact his girlfriend, and insists that he should be allowed 20 minutes in privacy in his bedroom for something. And this is how they attempt to escape the watch of Colossus in order to try and put something together to beat it. Now, massive spoiler ahead, but you should still watch this film. There we go. It totally doesn't work. The film ends with Colossus declaring that now it will completely take over the whole of humanity with control of both US and Russian military codes, that not only will humanity come to obey it, but also to love it. And quietly, Forbin declares his opposition to this idea, and then the film ends. It's a really good film. Now, I'm not sure that I'd actually realistically ever trust any computer to that extent that I just let it run and never let me sort of stick my foot in a hole somewhere that stops it from running. That to me seems a little rash, but fine. This is the 70s view, though. The computer represents perfection. It stopped being a military invader or an aggressive exterior force. Now the computer represents kind of like a deal with the devil. And the devil is going to make you perfect and is going to free you from old age and disease and all of these infirmities. But in exchange, it's going to take something from you, like your freedom and your humanity and your individuality. These are two others from this time. There are some questionable wardrobe choices in at least one of these films. Nevertheless, yes, that is Sean Connery, and he also wears a wedding dress in one. See, I did say it was questionable. Nevertheless, it's one of my favorite films, even though I can't entirely defend it. But they all represent this same idea of this terrible computer that is enslaving us for our own good. And that is a very early 70s view. So an interesting one here. This is probably the most obscure thing on here. A for Andromeda, I forgot to mention, A for Andromeda was unusual because it's missing. Sorry, you can't watch it. It's gone. This one, on the other hand, still exists, kind of. This was a TV movie broadcast in the mid-70s in the US. It has, to my knowledge, never been broadcast anywhere else ever again. It is almost impossible to find, well, in fact, it cannot be found legally. There are no legal copies. I've only found off-air copies on YouTube, and the budget was incredibly low. It's basically recorded theatre. and all of the quality of the copies that exist is appalling. So apologies for the sound, for the screen grabs that follow. They look awful. That's the best I can do. So this film, Paper Man, is about a group of students who receive a credit card in the mail for a man that doesn't exist. The paper man of the plot. He's a man who exists only in records. And they decide that, well, this man doesn't exist, but students really find it hard to get credit cards, so they keep it and start using it between them in order that they can, pay for their stuff, because being a student is expensive, I know. And they sort of get the computer expert on campus, one of the students, and look at him here with his clothes. This, by the way, is the guy who plays Al in Quantum Leap, if anyone remembers that. And he dresses incredibly formally. He's a student. He's actually a student, but the gag here is he always dresses really, really formally at all times, and is always incredibly serious. This is not how the 80s thought computer people were. And he agrees to continue helping them to build up records for the paper man, to kind of try and make him seem more real to the authorities, because the credit card people keep questioning the fact that he's there. And then the plot goes strange when the paper man appears to start killing people. I will not give away the twist, because it's actually a very good film. And it's on YouTube. It's not hard to find if you want to go and see it, and I recommend that you do. But it is predicated on the very interesting idea that the virtual world, the world of records, is more real and more powerful than the real world itself. At one point, someone is killed because someone, something, somewhere alters his medical records to remove the fact that he has an allergy to penicillin, and the nurse inadvertently kills him with it. That's a really interesting idea. And this was the mid-70s, and they were already thinking about this stuff. I find that amazing. I recommend this film. It had a foresight I don't think that was ever recognized at the time. All right. Oh, yes, and there is an amazing scene where he explains at his computer what he's doing. He's communicating with it. He's saying hello to it. He's logging on. Wow, logging on. That'll never catch on. Let's move forward a few years. This is a film from the 1970s from Germany. See if you've heard this one before. So there's a guy, he works for a big software company. He starts to have doubts about the nature of reality. He suspects the world is not quite what he thinks it is. He meets a mysterious woman who appears to have connections to what appears to be another world beyond this one. It turns out he's living in a computer simulation, and that there are people in the real world who can enter the simulation, and they do it via phone booths. There is a pointless rave scene at one point. So the film I'm describing is, of course, Welt am Draht, World on a Wire. I quite liked it. The gender politics are iffy at best, but it's a very interesting film. And yeah, The Matrix blatantly ripped it off. I mean, they really did. The entire first third of The Matrix is basically this. Now, this film ends when he wakes up in the real world. The Matrix went on then to have a whole load of other storylines, which they ripped off from other sources. Cough, cough, Ghost in the Shell, cough. So, but fine. It's not like I don't like The Matrix, it's fine. Disliking The Matrix is like disliking a little baby. It's cute, it's not very clever, but it's okay, and I like it, and I cannot dislike it. It has shooty and stuff. So, yeah, this is also the first instance that I can find of VR, because he, as in his virtual world, he has created his own virtual world, Simulacron 3, which they can enter via these virtual reality helmets. But of course, then the twist is he is himself living in a simulacron, and there's another guy somewhere up there with a virtual reality helmet on as well. So an interesting one, but very long and iffy politics. So late 70s, the computer changes its personality almost overnight. There are not many things which you would consider cultural epochs. That is, there is very much a time before it and a time after it, and after it everything is different. Star Wars is one. Harry Potter is probably another. There may be others, but those two come to my mind. And what is I tried to look for other instances of this meme, and I could not find it. But the point is now that the computer has done several things. It has changed what it is. It has left its box. It is now walking around, and its personality has changed. It's now friendly and happy and cute and ridiculous. It's innocent. It's not worldly and cynical and trying to rule you. It's now innocent, and the humans can instruct the robot in what humanity is actually like, and it will say, "Oh, wow, that's lovely," and stuff like that. That's how the computer's changed. It has gone from being a dominant father figure now to a sort of a younger brother or something. And this dominates the next 10 years or so of computer film. Incidentally, little side, this is often considered to be the first CGI sequence in a film ever. There's a lot of people that think it is. Also, the Death Star trench, everyone gets this wrong, is not equatorial, going east to west, it's north to south. If you watch that clip carefully, you'll see it's north to south. The other trench, the equatorial one, that's the really big one with the hangers. You are welcome. So, can anyone take a guess? And if I've spoken to any of you earlier today, you're not allowed to guess. But can anybody take a guess? What was the first film ever to feature a CGI sequence? Can anyone give me a guess? Go on. Sorry? Tron. Interesting guess. There is a lot less CGI in that film than you would ever realize. Nearly all of the special effects are hand-painted. There's probably about 2-3 minutes of actual CGI in that film. The rest is hand-painted. It's meant to look like a computer, but no, it's not Tron. Sorry? Escape from I didn't know there was a CGI sequence in it. I've never seen it. Escape from Los Angeles, no. Okay, no. In fact, all of you are wrong by decades. The first film with a CGI sequence was made in the 1960s, and it was called Vertigo. This is Vertigo, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. In the 1960s, it's a brilliant film. It's amongst my favorites. And these geometric shapes are computer-generated. Now, when I say computer-generated, they actually got a manual computer thing, put pens on it, and it drew each and every frame of this animated sequence. So it is, in the very true sense, CGI, computer-generated images. So can anyone take a guess now? What was the first CGI character to appear in an otherwise live-action film? In an otherwise live-action, so Toy Story is not. Toy Story is the first full-length CGI film. Anyone got a guess on that one? The Abyss. Good guess, good film, but no, wrong by a decade. One more guess. Can someone give me one? Good film, also The Abyss, especially the longer version. That's much better. Go on, sir. You look like you've guess face. Do you have a guess? No. Okay. Right. Fine. So the first one is, in fact, young Sherlock Holmes. This CGI knight that bursts out of its window and tries to apply capital punishment to a priest for reasons that you'd have to watch the film to understand, is the first CGI character ever to appear in a film ever. It was created by a company that we now know as Pixar. But this is the first one. It's about 15 seconds of footage in the entire film, but that's it. I actually say that stands up pretty well. Of course, it helps that it's meant to be like a stained glass knight, same as Toy Story stands up remarkably well because none of them are meant to be real people. They're toys, and it's easier to animate toys. And this pretty much colors the next 10 years or so of computer films. Is anyone else seeing their childhood in this set of images? Is there anyone here who can actually recognize all of these? I'm not going to ask for that, but I certainly do. I remember each and every one of them fondly. But pretty much all of these, with maybe the odd exception, are friendly. They're silver, with maybe some gold bits, and that is pretty much what every single one of them looks like. Now, I say all of them are friendly. There's the odd exception. Incidentally, if you look carefully, you'll see there's some actual shell commands in the Terminator's Terminator vision. It turns out that the Terminator is open source. I would really like to see that code. I really would. While true, if human kill, something like that, I'd imagine. I'd like to know. If anyone ever finds it on GitHub, let me know. So war games. That's our next epoch. War games. This is now the early 80s. Okay, this is actually a pretty good film. I saw it, believe it or not, for the first time last year. I'd never seen it before, no special reason. You see, kids, in the days before streaming media, when we used to have to watch things on this thing called live television, it was completely possible to just accidentally not see something because you weren't watching telly that day. I'd just never seen it. So this is our computer base, a great big expansive computer base, still pretty serious looking people with their serious looking suits and so on. This is in many ways a mirror image of Colossus the Forbin project. This computer has also been given complete access to all of the military codes because it worked so well last time. Why not do it again? But there's a difference. This time, the computer has a funny name. It's called Whopper. Whopper. And it has a childlike personality. It's got a chat interface for some reason, because that was a thing. And it behaves like a child. People can talk to it. It likes to play games. And this is our software developer main character. And this represents the worst point in the whole of this saga with regards to the treatment of women. It's a regular joke that his girlfriend there is unable to understand this complicated, mystifying world of the computers. I like this film, but those bits are quite embarrassingly bad. And this is pretty much the point of our time when women really are excluded from the computer world. Now, thankfully, things only get better from now on. But nevertheless, this is pretty bad. We do also see these guys, and we're treated to the very unhelpful stereotype of these sort of computer guys who are messy with, sloppy shirts and messy offices and very poor social skills. This is not a helpful stereotype. I'm not saying I've never met these guys, but it's still not very helpful. So we'd see a bit of hacking, and it's actually not terrible. He finds out there's what he calls a backdoor. Now, backdoor, it turns out, means bad password policy. So all he has to do is guess the password and he's in. That's apparently a backdoor. Fine. But you see him research the scientists working on the project. You see him doing all this sort of stuff to try and work out what could the pass. It's a sort of crude version of social engineering and one or two other things. So it's not totally wrong. And why not? Yeah, he manages to get into the computer, and then he says, let's play a game. Sure, let's play thermonuclear war. That sounds fun. Because he doesn't realize it's a computer. He thinks he's hacking into a games manufacturing company, and he does this by the completely reasonable method of trying every single phone number in the entire area until one responds to him in the way that's totally reasonable. I mean, honestly, that's how it works. Hackers aren't clever people. They're just trying every lock on every door in the entire area until they find someone that left their door unlocked. That's all they do. And when he realizes that the thing's actually real and actually trying to kill everyone in Russia or something, he says, well, let's stop. And, I thought this was a game. And the computer actually fairly reasonably says, what's the difference? It doesn't understand the difference between reality and game. And yeah, that makes sense. The computer doesn't have anything other than its inputs and its outputs. We have unit testing purely based on the idea that we can simulate reality for the purposes of a test. I'm okay with that. Now, we win at the end by playing a game of noughts and crosses, as I would know it. Americans call it tic-tac-toe. It may have other names, but this game here, and the computer learns for itself that there are games where the only way to win is not to play at all, because you cannot play at noughts and crosses and win. You can just force a draw. So everyone's happy, and also we have a cameo by criminally underrated actor James Woods. He should have been in more things, and he was not. But that's War Games. That's an interesting one. I like that one. There are a few others. Now, this is kind of the trend for most of the 80s. Okay, the computer now is like the genie in Aladdin. It's basically this sort of magical pixie in a box, and it's a happy, funny pixie in a box with magical powers. It will make all of your dreams come true with its magical powers. Electric Dreams, I especially recommend checking out. Its plot is suspiciously similar to Her, the recent film, to the point of Spike Jonze was specifically had to deny that he'd seen this film. I say Chinny reckon. I bet he did. Tron, I'll mention in brief, and Flight of the Navigator, again, happy, funny, cheery computer. This is this sort of late 80s trend. But now there is a brief trend also in computer horror films. There are a couple. And here we take the idea that the computer has come to rob you of some humanity or something, crossed it over with body horror in ways that I will not describe here because there may be children watching. It's pretty horrid stuff, in all honesty, but they do exist. So the 90s, and one of my unobjectively favorite films, The Net, starring Sandra Bullock. I like Sandra Bullock, legitimately, and she is giving everything that she can muster with all of her considerable acting powers to give legitimacy to this film. Has anyone seen The Net? Right, that's not enough people. More of you, if you take nothing away from this talk, go and watch The Net with Sandra Bullock, and you will see why in a minute. I love this film. It's the perfect intersection between feeling like you need to legitimately represent computers and having no idea how. So Sandra Bullock is a software tester. Here's the software she tests. It's Wolfenstein 3D. It has a bug. If you press escape, this happens. Ooh, that's pretty bad. You see, everyone is complaining about it. Everyone is complaining about it, that the bug is in Wolfenstein 3D. Wolfenstein 3D came on a CD or a disc, but everyone is complaining about the bug that's in the one. This film doesn't understand the difference between a desktop app and a website. It constantly makes this mistake. So what does our plucky software tester do with this bug in Wolfenstein 3D? Well, I'll show you. Launch debugger, get ourselves a hex editor, and we'll just edit that thing straight out of there. This lady is a software tester. She should be running the company. I can't do that. And now that she's hex edited the virus out of Wolfenstein 3D and popped it on a floppy disk, everyone's happy. I'm not entirely sure how any of this works, but fine. Well done, her. I salute her, and she's, clearly a godlike developer amongst us. So she also, to show you just how weird she is, orders pizza off the internet. Oh, well, that'll never catch on. The idea of this scene is to show you how weird and removed from reality she is. She's strange and does not socialize. She orders pizza without going out to a shop and waving money at people. Weird. None of us do that. And instead of a fire, she has a computer screen with a fire on it. That'll never catch on. That's weird. So, and she goes on chat rooms and finds that people say absolutely horrid things. And no, actually, that's about right. She's got us there. Absolutely true. Fine. So she finds a piece of software that is sent to her to test. It's a website, but it comes on a floppy disk because, once again, the computer, this film doesn't know the difference. So she tests the software, and she finds out they accidentally gave her the evil build and not the public build. And so the evil company accidentally sent it along with the evil backdoor, which is represented by the little pi symbol at the bottom. And if you click on it, then madness happens and you can hack into any computer system in all the world. And they sent this to the tester to test. I am not a clever man, but if I were an evil company attempting these sorts of things, I suspect I might have a separate evil build and safe build. But nevertheless, this is what she finds. So she pops the website on a floppy disk and goes on the run with it. And they reach out the evil baddies from their secret evil lair and change all of her records so that now she is listed as a wanted criminal. So we've entered the period of the 90s paranoid conspiracy thriller. There are many of these. I think The Fugitive started it, where they live somewhere and can reach out from their lair and ruin your life and now will pursue you everywhere. There's a ton of these things. Most of them are pretty good, but it did get a bit boring at the time. Some of my favorite bits, how about this? She's trying to find one of her chat room friends, so she uses a whois command, and it spits out his address. That noise you can hear in the background is GDPR, just trying its hardest not to burst in on her at this very second, because that's how a whois command works. She also hacks into the Swiss internet. The Swiss internet. And when it comes on, it says, Bienvenue à l'Internet Suisse. I know. I love this film. It's so stupid. Oh. And at the end, she wins by deciding to put aside her computery activities and go and literally touch grass, although that phrase was not invented yet, and spend time with her family. Okay, fine. Points for trying. I will give you that. 10 out of 10 for effort, the net. And it's nice that we've got a female protagonist. I approve of this. I do wonder if this would be the resolution for her if she were not female. This I wonder on. But fine, at least we have her. Plus, it's Sandra Bullock, and she's a legitimate great actor. So, a couple of other films I like from this period. One of my actual personal favorites, Sneakers. I would say watch this one. If you watch one, watch that one, honestly. It's a great film, and it's probably as close as Hollywood has ever gotten to showing you what something like pen testing is actually like. For some reason, they call it sneaking, and I do not know why. It's pen testing. They're pen testers, and they test pens, or whatever it is that they do. You know what I mean. Eraser, An Enemy of the State, that's another paranoid conspiracy thriller where they are out to get you. This is the thing of the 90s. It was what we did. A couple of interesting ones that are not quite to this on this pattern. We've got You Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Incidentally, actually a remake of a film from the 1940s called The Shop Around the Corner, a Christmas film. Interesting but useless facts. You are welcome. In You've Got Mail, email features heavily because it's become a fairly ubiquitous part of everyday life now. And that's interesting. And Jumpin' Jack Flash, I quite like that one. I mean, it's stupid as hell, but I quite like it. It features Whoopi Goldberg as a software. She's kind of like a data input clerk, and her data input system is also simultaneously a chat room for some reason. And she accidentally makes contact with the British Secret agent because I don't know. But it's Jonathan Pryce, and I love Jonathan Pryce. And also the baddie is once again criminally underrated actor James Woods, who really should have been in more things. But he's a baddie in this one, and it was much better when he was a goodie. I liked that one. And Whoopi Goldberg, as is usual, has to go on the run and prove innocence and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Also, naturally enough, the British guy is the baddie because Hollywood's always doing that to us. Yeah, and there's also a cameo by fantastic Dutch actor Jeroen Krabbe. I like Jeroen Krabbe. Why isn't he around more? Moving on further into the 90s, Hackers. Has anybody seen Hackers? Hack the planet! I love this film. I also love this one. There is an interesting observation I made while watching this, and that is that in the 80s, the idea was that the computer was like a magic-using imp or genie. But now, in Hackers, the computer has become magic itself. Now the humans can become the sorcerers and use the computer to do magic. And that is basically what this film portrays. They use the computer to, I don't know, fool people at the school by bringing the sprinklers on simultaneously to soak everyone in water or whatever. And they're doing it largely for pranks. And unlike the earlier decade films where the computer represented conformity and everyone was dressed formally in suits and all the rest, now the generation that probably started with war games has grown up, and now all of these guys are incredibly individualistic. The computer is enabling their individualism and is giving them access to this magical ability to do wonders. And I find that in contrast to the earlier films absolutely fascinating. Incidentally, another quick quiz for everyone. Who was the first computer hacker ever shown on screen? Who played them and in which film? Can anyone give me one guess? Go on. The first hacker. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Anyone? No? Okay. Well, I'll tell you. It was, in fact, Benny Hill. Benny Hill was the first hacker ever depicted on screen. It was in the 1960s film The Italian Job, where what the guy does is they bribe him with, it doesn't matter, but they bribe him and he comes up with a computer program which is stored in great big reels of tape, and it reprograms the Italian traffic light system to cause a traffic jam, but with one clear path through the city. The first hacker. We praise you, Lord Hill. But Hackers. I like this film a lot. But this film is, in many ways, a throwback to the 1960s. And yes, that is Angelina Jolie. She was young too, like me. So this is, in many ways, an interesting throwback to the 60s. There are lots of references here to 60s counterculture. There's poetry read by Ginsberg, and there's references to like 60s music, like Mama Cass and all this sort of a thing. And there's references to Orwell as well. So it's almost like whoever made this film is trying to compare the hacker culture of the 90s with the 60s counterculture movement. There is lots of crossover between those throughout the entire film. They're basically hippies on a freak through a lot of this. And I'd recommend it. It's great. It does a clever thing where it doesn't attempt to realistically depict computers. Rather, it symbolically represents what we do. It's a bit like mountain climbing films. Mountain climbing, very interesting to do, not interesting to watch. Consequently, nearly all Hollywood films do bananas things like, say, we're mountain climbing with gelignite on our backs that might explode and take the mountain with us. Ooh. Hacking takes the idea that we are just using like clips from old films and CGI graphics and stuff to represent what goes through their heads rather than what's on the screen. I like this approach. It's aged remarkably well. Also, accurately, it shows that a lot of hackers are very underage, like this guy being arrested at the beginning of the film. Most hackers in real life are driven to court by their mums because they are not old enough to drive. This is true. And we see a little bit of social engineering. At one point, the guy phones up the security guard at a company and pretends to be tech support and asks him to just tell me the passwords off the router there and be a good chap and all that. And yeah, that's basically how it works. Absolutely. And this, by the way, is the server room. I love it. I mean, all the gloom lighting. This is our baddie, by the way. And he's riding a skateboard in the server room. And for some reason, Penn Jillette works for the servers. And I love it. It also has the epic dialogue, "Never fear, I is here." I love this film so much. And this is the evil hacker. He's like the evil sorcerer who's trying to use the computers for evil, for gain and profit. Boo. And our hackers, our good guys, they're using it to do pranks and just to spread freedom and nonsense and whatever. There is an epic hacking battle at the end of the film, which includes a pointless VR headset, a keyboard with keys made of emojis, or as we used to call them, emoticons. Viruses themed around the Cookie Monster, which you can destroy by typing the word cookie. And nonsense, I like it. It's basically the sort of the cool revolutionary spirit of the 60s versus the man. That's the symbolic idea of the film. I quite like this one. It's cute and it's got a nice soundtrack. Definitely worth a watch. After I gave this talk for the first time, my wife finally agreed to let me put it on and we could watch it together. She even kind of liked it. That's what she said anyway. So, in the late 90s into the early 2000s, a couple more interesting ones. I'm just going to mention them briefly. Johnny Mnemonic, possibly one of the best cyberpunk films ever made, aside from Blade Runner, brings in the idea of wetware, which is where he has had his brain modified and his memories of his childhood erased so he can use them basically as a giant USB storage, except it's made of brain. And I actually really like that film. It's a lot of fun. The Matrix. Has anyone heard of this film, The Matrix? It's a little obscure. Actually, funny story, when I was at school, when I was doing my A-levels at college, and I was doing my computing A-level, the teacher said, "We're going to have a treat for you on the last day. We're going to bring a VHS in of a computer film." And we all thought, it's 1999. Of course, it's The Matrix. And what she brought in was The Net, starring Sandra Bullock. Yeah. Interestingly, The 13th Floor is based on the same book that World on a Wire was based on. Technically, The 13th Floor and The Matrix are kind of the same film. I don't know if anyone's actually seen The 13th Floor, but if you've seen The Matrix, to a degree, you've seen The 13th Floor. There's just less shooty, kill, and a little bit more philosophy. And a really good CGI sequence that you see on the cover of the DVD there. But it is well based on the same source material. Swordfish. I like this one. So, Swordfish, this is the early 2000s. We're moving away from that sort of hackers and magic period. Now we're trying to treat the computers with some sort of more legitimacy because that was all kind of magic. Now let's try and be grown-ups with a very grown-up film like Swordfish. And this is the era of the slick cyber thriller. And this is probably one of the first of that sort. So, our hackers, computer experts look like this. Like impossibly handsome Hugh Jackman and whatever that guy is. And they dress in a way that I have never dressed and look cooler than I will ever look. But apparently this is what computer programmers look like, man. And he has to do ridiculous things like program a hack into the FBI website with a gun pointed to his chest. And, well, there is some more distraction, shall we say. I am not elaborating. If you've seen the film, then you know. If you do not, I'm not telling you. And this is what our UIs look like. At one point, our hero is astonished to find, look, the computer has 7 monitors. Oh, that must be a very big computer. This is a Hollywood cliche that dates all the way back. The monitor is the computer, and it makes no difference. One of my guilty pleasures that is indefensible is Zoolander. And I love the bit where he tries to free the files from the computer by smashing the monitor to bits. I can't defend it, but I love it. Also, if you freeze frame any of the websites in this film, you'll find that they are actually impossible IP addresses, like 271.223.21.5 and stuff like that. But apparently they do have dark mode already invented. That's cool. That's nice. This is the software he creates for putting viruses into things. He clearly spent more time on the UI than he ever spent actually writing the virus. Because why would I do that? But fine. This is an obscure one, and I think it should not be. I think that everyone needs to give this film its due. Has anyone heard of Simone? A couple of you. It's an obscure one. I would argue that although this is a sort of a farcical comedy and my embarrassment threshold is low, so I watched it like this, nevertheless, this film is prophetic. I'll show you why. It's about a film director played by Al Pacino. And Al Pacino is unable to find an actress who will put up with his incredibly specific demands. And so he comes up, he's presented with a piece of software that if you input your performance, it will convert it into a virtual actor using your performance as a basis. This film was made in the early 2000s. At the time, it was derided for being ridiculous. We can do this. We can do this. This is real. This is happening. They're called synthespians. They exist. There are real virtual actors that you can employ by paying a license. This is a real thing. Most of the film is actually a farce whereby he attempts to hide the fact that his actress is completely fake and goes to incredibly ridiculous lengths in order to maintain the fake reality of Simone. Simulation 1, Simone. As I say, don't watch if you've got a low embarrassment threshold. It's not that funny. But this aspect I found absolutely fascinating. He actually makes Simone by patching together elements of various actresses that he likes from the 50s and 60s. Once again, we literally do this now. It's quite impressive. In fact, this guy here was caught doing that exact thing not very long ago. He was a biking blogger, but he presented as a cute lady biking blogger. And what he did was he recorded with the wig and then used a computer to just change his face into this lady. I believe he was caught when he forgot to remove one of the reflections in a mirror somewhere, and it became clear that he was in fact a man. Now, fine, there's nothing wrong with any of this, but I find it fascinating, though, that it was considered impossible, and yet it's absolutely going on all the time. Interesting stuff. Okay. Couple of recent ones that are starting to look more seriously at the impact of computers. I'm not going to go into these in too much detail. Mr. Robot actually went to the extent of hiring actual consultants to be on set and to make sure that all the computer work that you see in that is accurate. And so far as I am aware, any computing that you see is basically accurate. There is a slightly improbable thing where he's got a tool that can just sort of guess what anyone's password is or something. And yeah, nah. I mean, it's not that sophisticated. It's called a rainbow table or something, and all you do is just cycle through like the top 1,000 passwords, and there's a good chance you're in. They're trying to make him look more clever than in fact he is. So yeah. And Black Mirror. There's lots to be said about Black Mirror, and just watch it. It's a little hard to know how these are going to last and how these are going to be seen in the future, but Black Mirror does have some interesting ideas. I did recently very much enjoy, what was the one? Joan is Awful, I believe it's called, where everyone who owns phones in that world has the phone watching them all the time and recording them all the time, and then that is used to create a synthetic likeness, which is then put into a TV series of your life daily as it happens, starring a different actor. We're not that far off. In fact, I think that's probably possible. I don't think it would take a great deal of work to get that to work right now. I'm already watching a CGI, entirely AI-generated show at the moment. It's appalling. It's called something like the Max Steel Show. It's brilliant if you haven't seen it. Utter nonsense, but it's happening. This stuff is not far off. And if there is an obsession of the recent run of computer films, it's AI. Everything now is about AI. That is the absolute obsession at the moment. The magic of AI, the wonders of AI, the terrors of AI. Ex Machina, I believe, I haven't actually seen that one, but I believe it's about an AI that runs rogue or something. The Mitchells versus the Machines, I loved that one, especially as the machines are foiled at one point because they have a dog, and the dog trips up their pattern recognition software because it is unable to tell whether it's a dog or a pig or a loaf of bread. That's totally realistic, actually. I've seen examples of pictures of cookies where the computer can't tell if it's a dog or a cookie. That's a real thing. I love that. The Creator, what if we make self-aware AIs citizens? What could happen? And so on. That's possibly further away. That's sort of touching on the idea of the universal AI that can do all things and is basically an artificial human in a box. I'm not sure why we'd ever do that. I mean, it's an interesting experiment, but what would we do it for? I don't want my toaster to start having existential angst and worry about the nature of the economy. I want my toaster to make good toast. Why would I want it to do anything else? So okay, fine, but this is a thing. Her, which has a story which is almost identical to Electric Dreams. Not joking. Heart of Stone, that's, again, it's based on the same sort of idea as basically The Net, starring Sandra Bullock. Only this time we're trying to treat it seriously, man. But same basic idea. Magic machine that can hack into anything. Also, our computer experts are often portrayed now as female. This is good. This is a trend I want to see. I have 2 daughters, and I would very much like for them to feel that they can enter into the IT world and that it shouldn't be a big deal. And I think things are getting better. When I went to university, which was in 2005, there was 1 woman in my entire year. That's appalling. That's awful. I've heard tell that it's far better than it used to be, but we're still a long way from where we need to be. And it's good, though, that Hollywood is at least giving us images that show women in tech and that it's not a problem. They haven't lost any individuality. They haven't lost their individual style. They're not lacking cool. Some of these, at least, are pretty cool. That said, I quite like the goth look, so I'm okay with this. So, yeah, this is good. Things, I feel, are on a good trend. It's still as improbable and unrealistic as ever. AI can't do most of those things Hollywood thinks it can do, but still, the trend is a good one. If anyone is interested, this is my personal list of my 8 films from this that I think are particularly good or worth seeing. 2001, Colossus, The Forbin Project, War Games. Electric Dreams, I didn't talk about a lot because there wasn't really much more to add to this story. I've only got an hour. So, but I really liked it. It was basically the slow growth and self-awareness of an AI over 2 hours, but marketed as a goofy buddy comedy. I think the film shot itself in the foot by not sort of leaning into the strengths of the film, which was the incredible detail with which it depicted the growth of the AI. It starts by hearing noises around it and imitating them, then hearing music and imitating it, but then starting to improvise, and then starting to imitate speech and so on. These sequences are incredible, and I adore them. They're brilliant. And also, it's got a great soundtrack. Human League and Culture Club and stuff like that. It's the 80s in a box, basically. Johnny Mnemonic, Sneakers, Hackers, and Simone. It's mostly for interest. I'm not totally convinced of its worth as a cinematic experience, but as someone watching the history of computers through film, that's an interesting one. Finally, this is my website. It's thecodepainter.co.uk, and this is my blog, where I have far more detailed reviews of some of these films, plus 1 or 2 I haven't covered. I've been running it on and off. I've been really, really busy and various other things this year. It's a little out of date, but I have at least 3 or 4 films on the list. I forgot to put a slide in for it, but I also got interviewed for the Compromising Positions podcast, which, no, it's actually a security podcast, where we've done part 1 talking computer films, and we'll be doing a part 2, probably released in the new year. So if you want to hear me talking lots more about films, and I have a lot to say on the subject of Jurassic Park, then do feel free to have a look at that. Now, before we wrap up, does anybody have any questions? Although this isn't exactly that sort of, but I'm happy to take questions. My favorite film, incidentally, is probably either Amelie or Wrath of Khan, Star Trek II. Those are both very good. Oh, or Once Upon a Time in the West. I like that one too. Does anyone have any other questions, though? Going once? Going twice? Okay. As a wise man once said, that's all, folks. Thank you.